I think I've been into the 36mm Rolex Explorer for as long as I've been into watches. I have dozens of images and videos over several years of me trying on 36mm Explorers in stores. Not shown in the photos are the frustrated salespeople thinking, just buy it already. And so last year, for my 40th birthday, I did. I bought myself a 114270 Rolex Explorer from 2004, and it felt good. Not just physically, it is very comfortable, but emotionally. I finally bought what I think is a pure modern classic. Simple to the point of boring, maybe, robust, handsome, and at a size that was always my favorite for the Explorer. And then, just days later after I bought it, Rolex did something that I don't think they've ever done before. They basically revived the watch. The 36mm Explorer was back. It wasn't exactly like mine, but it was close enough that I tumbled emotions first into a black hole of uncertainty. Well, I mean, not really, but I did wonder if I'd made a mistake. And then I kind of moved on with my life and my collection, but I've always wondered, did I buy the wrong Explorer? And so when my buddy Michael offered to loan me his new 36mm Explorer, I knew I'd have the chance to finally answer that question and also make a video about it because people have been asking me for this for a year and a half. May this video help you avoid your own black holes of uncertainty. This is my 2004 Rolex Explorer 114270, and this is Michael's 2022 124270. If these look the same to you, if you're like, what the fuck is this guy comparing two identical watches? I congratulate you. You are living a more wholesome, healthier, and better prioritized life. But for the rest of us, the minutia, the subtle changes we find between Rolex watches, it's kind of exciting. It's silly, yes, meaningless, perhaps, but it's kind of fun. As I like to say, everyone should have a hobby that they're embarrassed by. And these Explorers are a pretty good example of those subtle differences that are a big deal for a lot of collectors. Don't believe me? Just check the comments of this video after it's been up for a week. 16 years between these watches and a lot has changed if you know what you're looking for. And let's start with something we can't actually look at right now, the movement. Inside the older watch is the Rolex 3130 movement. Inside the newer watch is the 3230 movement. Both are great. Rolex has been making outstanding movements for a very long time. But the 3230 it's definitely an upgrade. It has better shock protection and a longer power reserve thanks to the Chronergy escapement that was debuted in 2017. Most owners probably won't notice the difference between these movements, but the newer one is better, it just is. Another aspect where the new watch is noticeably better is the anti-reflective treatment on the crystal. The newer crystal is clearly better. Clearly. Hold for applause. It's subtle, but I have had an easier time reading Michael's watch. It's actually made me wonder if I could get my crystal treated and improved. And I started with the movement and the anti-reflective coating because I think those are the most objective differentiators. Most of the other differences, they're a matter of taste. The cases have the same diameter. It's kind of hard to measure these cases, but I read it as around 35.2 millimeters across. But the length, the thickness, and the lug spacing, those are all different. I measure the length of the old watch as 43.7 millimeters long. That's from north to south. I measure the new watch at just 43 millimeters. Whether my calipers are correctly calibrated, it doesn't matter. Whatever the actual lengths are, the new watch is 0.7 millimeters shorter. And the newer Explorer is slightly thicker too, 11.5 millimeters versus 11.1. A pretty minor difference, but the older reference is measurably slimmer. And then there are the lug spacings, the width of the end links. My watch from 2004 has 20mm lug spacings. The newer watch has 19mm lug spacings. The result is a subtle visual difference. The watch head of the newer reference looks larger because the bracelet is narrower. On my older Explorer, to me, the watch head looks slightly smaller when looked at by itself on its bracelet. And that effect is emphasized by how the bracelets taper. The bracelet of the new Explorer tapers from 19mm at the lugs to 14mm where it meets the clasp. The old Explorer tapers from 20mm to about 15.5. 14mm, that's really narrow. It's totally comfortable, no problems there, but it's almost startling to see at first. The newer bracelet and the new clasp are much sturdier and heavier. The old bracelet is light, it rattles, and the clasp feels like it was stamped from a tin can, and I like that. I prefer it. I've had quite a few Rolexes, and this bracelet from the early 2000s, this is my favorite. But the new Explorer bracelet has the Easy Link extension in the clasp that allows you to pop out an additional 5mm when you need it. It can be really nice, but on this watch, it's so light and it can be worn so loose that this is one of the few watches I haven't used the Easy Link on. And as for weight, sized to my 7-inch wrist, the old watch is 102 grams and the newer watch is 117 grams. The bracelet plays a big part in that weight, and maybe the thicker case too. Under the crystal, of course, are more differences. The one that I really like and think is an improvement are that the numerals are loomed on the newer watch. Rolex started doing this with the last generation of the 39mm Explorers, and it's something they should have done 30 years ago. And maybe it's because those numerals are filled with lume that the numerals are larger on the new watch. And to be more cohesive, the markers are larger too. And the minute hashes along the outside of the dial are bolder, and so is the dial text. Really, everything on the dial of the new watch is larger and bolder. And I'm on the fence about it. You know, I loves me some lume, but I think the older watch looks a little cleaner, maybe even a little more vintage, which, 2004 is going to be considered vintage soon, isn't it? Time, you cruel mistress. And just outside the dial is the polished bezel. I don't have a great way of measuring it, but it's clear to me that the bezel on the newer watch is wider, which along with the larger markers adds to that bolder appearance. And looking from the side, the crystal on the older watch, my watch, is raised higher, which I prefer. It's probably more prone to chipping, but as with a lot of this older watch, it's got that kind of old school charm. If you've got the nerve and the goods, the Explorer can look great on a lot of different straps. I prefer bracelets, but I've seen some great combos for the Explorer 1. But there are two things that might be a problem with this newer Explorer. First is that 19mm lug spacing. 19mm straps are out there, but there just aren't as many options. The other issue is something I've never seen before on a Rolex, and it's this strange profile between the lugs. There's a deep gap between the bezel and the bottom half of the case. It doesn't mean you can't put a thin strap on here, but you will probably be able to see this gap, and it might bother some people. On my 18cm wrist, these watches wear pretty similarly. The older watch does feel more comfortable to me. I think that's because it's 15 grams lighter and the bracelet has more flex to it. But I can't imagine anyone thinking that the newer watch is uncomfortable. It's really nice on the wrist. And to you men, and yeah, it's always men who say, "Lol, looks like a woman's watch." 1, what's wrong with women's watches? And 2, if you're bothered by what size watch a stranger wears, there are a lot of good mental health resources available. There's no shame in getting help. So, did I buy the wrong Rolex Explorer? No. I prefer parts of the old watch. I prefer parts of the new watch. But there's nothing about the new Explorer that makes me spiral back into that black hole. I think this new reference is terrific, but there's just more I prefer on the older watch. So I didn't buy the wrong watch. I bought the right one, for me, and that's what you need to find for yourself. The timing, the price, the condition, it all lined up for me too. And maybe the announcement of the new Explorer was all part of my journey. Maybe it was a cosmic test of will and conviction to see if I was worthy of the legendary Explorer. Or maybe, more likely, it was just Rolex being Rolex, unpredictable, unstoppable, and inscrutable.